My dad collapsed in front of me, gasping for air. I called 911, but the ambulance never made it. It was blocked. By Claire Wells, the HOA president. She stood at the entrance, clipboard in hand, blocking the paramedics from passing. "I can't let you in without visitor registration," she said, unfazed. I couldn't believe it. My dad's life was on the line and she was still enforcing rules. I didn't have a choice. I called for a helicopter, and that's when the real chaos began. I ran out the door, panic bubbling up in my throat. The flashing lights of the ambulance were still stuck at the entrance. Claire Wells stood there, blocking the way like a stone wall with a clipboard. She barely glanced at me as I approached her fingers, still scribbling in that damn book. "Move your car, Claire," I shouted, but she didn't flinch. "I'm doing my job, Mr. Mitchell. Visitor registration protocol must be followed," she replied, her voice as cold and calculating as ever. I wanted to punch her right then, but I held back. My dad's life was on the line. "This is an emergency," I yelled. "You're blocking the ambulance." She smiled, that same smug, unbothered grin she always had when she was in control. "I understand this is stressful, but rules exist for a reason." I felt a surge of rage in my chest, my mind racing with ways to force her out of the way. But it wasn't about her anymore. It was about my father, who might not make it if we didn't act now. Claire's eyes stayed locked on mine, as if daring me to challenge her. It was clear she thought she could win. This wasn't just about a gate. It was about control. The more she dug her heels in, the more I knew I couldn't let her win. I pulled out my phone. "Mike, I need the helicopter here now. This woman's not letting the ambulance through." I stormed back inside, grabbing my keys. I was done with this. But Claire wasn't the type to back down. She'd given me that exact look when she handed me the HOA rulebook 3 months ago, and I didn't want to acknowledge that I'd fallen into her trap. The first violation had come not long after I moved back. "It was the lawn too tall," she said, "and by exactly a 1/4 inch. That was the beginning. At first I ignored it, chalking it up to the absurdity of a neighborhood that took such small things seriously. But soon, more violations came. A garden hose left out overnight, a wind chime unapproved, Halloween decorations up 2 days too early, and then my mailbox, the wrong shade of blue. Admiral blue, not navy. I couldn't believe it. I had inherited this house from my mom, and the mailbox came with it. When I got the letter about my backyard deck, I almost lost it. The boards were rotting. They were dangerous. But when I tried to replace them, Claire showed up, clipboard in hand. "Do you have a permit for this work?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I wanted to scream. I looked at Tony, the contractor, who was clearly as fed up as I was. "It's just a repair," I said, but Claire's smile didn't waver. Layer 2. Boundary violation, 150-200 words. That was when she went too far. I had been replacing the rotting boards when she appeared at the back gate of my yard. It was a warm Thursday afternoon, and the last thing I needed was her disrupting a simple task. "Excuse me, do you have a permit for this work, Claire?" asked her voice like fingernails on a chalkboard. We're just fixing some old boards," Tony explained, motioning to the tools scattered across the deck. "Nothing major," but Claire wasn't hearing it. "I'm afraid this constitutes external modification," she said, pulling out her clipboard. "You'll need to submit for HOA approval. It's Form 27B. The board meets next month." "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. I looked at Tony, whose face was bright red. "The boards are a safety hazard," I said, trying to stay calm. I could feel my pulse racing, but I couldn't let her see me lose it. "I'll need to see proof of insurance and his business license," she added with a self-satisfied smile. I knew it was her idea of exerting control, and right now it was working. But I was tired of playing her game. It wasn't just the deck anymore. That night, my dad's chest pains came back. He'd been brushing them off for weeks, claiming it was nothing more than heartburn. But I knew better. When I tried to bring it up again, he just waved me off. But then, over dinner, everything changed. I was serving his favorite lasagna, a dish my mom had always made for us, and he suddenly stopped eating. His face turned ashen. "Dad?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His hand clutched his chest, and then he buckled, crashing to the floor. "Dad!" I screamed, rushing to his side. His breathing was shallow. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, trying to keep it together. The operator was calm, professional. But I wasn't. "I need an ambulance now. My father's having a heart attack." As I held my dad, I could feel the cold sweat on his skin. The ambulance should have been there by now. But when I glanced out the window, my stomach dropped. The flashing lights were stuck at the entrance to the neighborhood, and I knew exactly why. I ran outside, my heart pounding. I reached the gate and found Claire still standing there, clipboard raised like some kind of barricade. The paramedics were already out of the truck arguing with her. "This is an emergency," one of them shouted, his voice tight with frustration. "We need to get in." But Claire didn't back down. "I need to see your visitor registration forms first," she said, like it was just another routine task. I couldn't take it anymore. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I yelled, rushing toward her. "My dad is having a heart attack and you're standing here with your clipboard." "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Mitchell," Claire replied, her voice cold. I didn't even have time to react before the police car pulled up. The officer got out, but Claire was already talking, listing every reason she had for blocking the ambulance. I turned to the officer. "You need to make her move. Now." The officer hesitated, glancing between the paramedics and Claire. "Ma'am, can you move your vehicle?" Claire glared at him, but finally she walked to her car. But she wasn't done. "I'm reporting this to the board," she muttered, looking back at me with that smug satisfaction. I didn't care. I ran back to the house, grabbed my phone, and made the call that would change everything. "I need the helicopter here now, Mike," I said, my voice steady but filled with urgency. Mike was my old flying buddy from the medevac days. He knew how serious this was. "I'll have the crew ready in 10 minutes, he replied. "Is your front yard clear? Just get here," I said, hanging up before he could say anything more. When I returned to the front gate, I could see the ambulance finally moving. But Claire wasn't finished yet. She stood there, arms crossed, still glaring at me like I was the problem. I ignored her, walking past and turning toward the driveway. But that's when I saw it, my dad's life on the line, and she was still here, still obstructing. This had gone too far. I heard the faint sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air as the chopper approached. I turned back to Claire, eyes cold. "You don't get to decide this time, Claire. My dad's life is more important than your stupid rules." As the helicopter circled overhead, I knew I had taken it to the limit, and there was no turning back. I heard it before I saw it, the unmistakable thrum of the helicopter blades cutting through the air. As it drew closer, the whole street seemed to hold its breath. My neighbors had gathered, drawn out by the chaos, and even Karen was watching, her arms crossed tightly, her face twisted in disbelief. "Are you insane?" she screamed at me as I walked toward the ambulance, my eyes locked on the flashing red lights. The paramedics were already unloading their gear, preparing to get my father into the ambulance. They'd had to fight for every inch of ground, with Karen standing in their way until the very last second. Now she was trying to turn the attention onto me. "I'm doing my job," she shouted, her voice rising in fury. "This is a violation of HOA rules. You can't just shut up." I roared, stepping closer to her. "My father almost died because of you. You've been blocking medical help for hours while I've watched him suffer. Do you think this is still about your stupid rules? It's life and death, Karen." She looked stunned, her composure breaking for just a second. But then her usual arrogance crept back. "I will have you removed from this neighborhood," she hissed. "I'd like to see you try," I shot back. But my attention was already on the chopper hovering above my lawn, ready to take my father to the hospital. The helicopter lowered itself, the roar of the rotors growing deafening as it touched down on the front lawn. My neighbors scattered some filming with their phones, others standing in stunned silence. But none of them were looking at me. They were all staring at Karen, waiting for her to do something to stop being the barrier she had been. "This is happening," I muttered under my breath. The chopper was here, and there was no going back. I saw Mike waving from the cockpit, giving me the signal. We didn't have much time. But as I walked toward the helicopter, I noticed something. Karen was still standing there, clipboard in hand, looking as though she could command the entire scene to stop if she wanted to. But I wasn't the only one who was fed up with her, Karen said, Colonel Bryant, stepping forward from the crowd. He was a veteran, always at odds with her over his hedge height, but today it wasn't about shrubs. "You're blocking medical services, and that's not something we tolerate. Your rules aren't more important than people's lives." The crowd murmured in agreement, and for the first time, I saw Karen's facade crack. But she wasn't ready to give up. "You don't understand," she shouted, her voice trembling with anger. "This is about maintaining standards. I'm just doing what's best for the community." "No," a neighbor called out. "You're doing what's best for you." That was the moment her grip on Oakwood Estates started slipping. No one was buying her act anymore. The paramedics swiftly transferred my dad onto the helicopter stretcher. I felt my heart race again, but this time it was with hope. He was going to make it. The ambulance wasn't going to save him, this helicopter was. But just as I was about to step onto the helicopter myself, I heard Claire's voice again. "This is unauthorized," she screamed. "You can't land a helicopter here. This is against every HOA bylaw, every noise ordinance." I turned to her, feeling the anger bubbling up inside me. I was done with her. "Shut up! You can't talk to me like that," she shouted, her hands shaking with rage. I will have you evicted. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. The officer who had been standing by was moving in to restrain her as she began waving papers around, but I was done. No, Claire, I said, my voice steady but cold. You don't get to do this anymore. This isn't about you or your rules. My father almost died because of you. Her eyes darted from me to the helicopter and back, trying to find some shred of control she could cling to. But there was nothing left. She had lost. The officer finally stepped forward and grabbed her arm, pulling her back. Ma'am, you're obstructing emergency services. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the area. Her face went from red with fury to pale with humiliation as the officer escorted her away. It was a moment I thought I'd never see, Claire Wells being dragged off the scene powerless. I turned to the helicopter, giving Mike a nod. Let's go, I said. The helicopter's engines roared to life as it took off, lifting my father into the sky. I watched the neighborhood fade beneath us, the last echoes of Karen's protests growing distant, and in that moment I knew everything had changed. The grip she'd held over this neighborhood was shattered. The helicopter lifted off, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. My dad was on his way to the hospital stable and in good hands. I stood on my front lawn watching the rotor blades grow smaller in the distance. My neighbors had gathered, and for the first time since moving in, I saw their faces no longer distant, but connected by the same shared moment. Mike came over, clapping me on the back. You did what needed to be done, man. Colonel Bryant, a gruff but honorable guy, nodded. It's good to see someone finally stand up to her, he said with a rare smile. Sadi, who'd quietly supported me through all the HOA nonsense, was next. I never thought I'd see a helicopter land in Oakwood Estates, she said, her voice full of awe. But I'm glad it was you who did it. I wasn't just breathing a sigh of relief for my father anymore. I felt a deep sense of change. The community was starting to shift too. They weren't afraid of Karen anymore. I wasn't afraid of her anymore, and I knew that was the first step toward real change here. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Wednesday evening. I couldn't wait to see how things would unfold. When I walked into the community center, the room was packed, not just with board members, but with nearly every resident. And there, at the head of the table, sat Claire Wells. Her usual self-assured posture was gone. She looked more like a woman clinging to her last ounce of power. This emergency session of Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association is now in session, Claire began, her voice shaking slightly. We are here to address the blatant violations committed by resident Jack Mitchell on Sunday evening. I couldn't hold back. You blocked an ambulance from getting through. That's why I had to take drastic measures. The room went silent. But then Colonel Bryant stood up. I moved to dismiss all charges against Mr. Mitchell and vote on whether Claire Wells should continue as HOA president. One by one, hands shot up in support of me. Even Sadi, who had kept a low profile until then, raised her hand. The vote was quick. Claire Wells was voted out as HOA president. The applause was deafening. I could see her face go from red with anger to pale with humiliation as the reality sank in. She'd lost. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My dad was recovering well, and the neighborhood was buzzing with change. Sadi was voted in as the new HOA president, and the first thing she did was announce a relaxed set of rules. No more ridiculous lawn height restrictions. No more arbitrary fines for small things like wind chimes or Halloween decorations. Oakwood Estates was finally becoming a community again. 6 months later, Dad and I were out back rebuilding the deck together. No permits, no paperwork, just a father and son working side by side, fixing what had been broken. Can't believe we're finally doing this, Dad chuckled, gripping the hammer like he was trying to show off his strength. I think landing that helicopter was the best thing that ever happened to this neighborhood, I said, wiping the sweat from my brow. Just then, a moving truck pulled up to Karen's old house. It had been sold after 3 price reductions. The new owners were medevac pilots just like me. You're kidding, I said to Dad. Nope, he grinned. What are the odds? I walked over to introduce myself to Derek, the new neighbor. It's a pretty relaxed place these days, I said, shaking his hand. Yeah, I heard about the helicopter, he laughed. Seems like it's the place to be for medevac pilots. I looked around, feeling a sense of peace. For the first time, Oakwood Estates didn't feel like a prison. It felt like home. And as I looked at the old house, the last remnant of Karen's reign, I realized something. Sometimes it takes a helicopter landing to break all the right rules.